we have with us Ms. Shilpa Ahir, Head of Strategy and Operations at Novartis Healthcare. She's been working there for over 5.5 years. And prior to that, she has worked at Thomson Reuters for almost 4 years. And she focuses on development and execution of NGSC Hyderabad strategy and roadmap, key priorities, site initiatives, governance, and operating rhythm for Novartis Global Service Centers network. So today we have a very interesting topic with us, which is what do you have and what do you need in corporate world. So I think it's a very interesting topic that we have.
Great. Thanks, Nihar. I want to start by saying that you cannot do strategy without understanding operations. You can't just jump into saying, I want to get into a strategy kind of role without understanding how operations happen and going through the fire of operations. So here, I wanted to just call out the difference between operations and strategy. When it comes to operations, when you get into operations roles, when you get into corporate jobs and start working, typically in operations you are responding to customers, you're working on product services, you're improving efficiency, you learn, you hear terms like productivity has to be better, your activities deliverables per hour need to be higher, your pricing to the customer is this many dollars per hour based on this output that you give. So it's a very quantified output related term, and the way things are done, and somebody has defined it that this is the way it has to be done, and then and you go ahead and deliver. So you're doing more of implementation, delivery, productivity, saving costs, or you're doing sales, or and so on and so forth. And it is more real time. It is more, in terms of outlook, operations is more to do with, you're looking at that year, if calendar year, be it January to December, or be it April to March of next year, whatever is the calendar year that you follow. Whereas when you come to strategy is always long term. You always talk about 3 to 5 years. It typically asks the things that you would look at is what is your competitive advantage, how long term should you look at. Sometimes you're also asked to look at 10 to 20 years depending on the scope that you are currently working on. Operations is very much specific to key performance indicators, how your month looks, how you're trending against your targets, how the year therefore looks, and where will you end at, and then you will celebrate. Whereas strategy is more to do which way is the company going, which way should you therefore steer your location, your function, your domain. So that's the difference between the two. Global company, global organization, which geography you're in or where you need to play is very, very important, to decide. If you are into a sales organization, which markets are you planning to play in? How is the pricing scenario in those markets? For example, I'm sure you would have heard about US and the regulation on pricing. Also, you look at the value added by these locations. How is the ecosystem in the location? How have other companies and how have other firms done? Why did they choose this location? And also capabilities and talent. In terms of how is the talent, like people like you, do we have enough of them to do the job? And are you having the capabilities and skills to do the job that the firm is looking to put over here? So a lot of these considerations are there in a strategic plan. As I said, operations defines how to win, whereas strategy defines where to play. So key performance indicators, efficiency, these are terms you will hear every day. This is something that you'll work on. You will try to find new tools to improve productivity. You have more quality processes for efficiency, quality. You look at attrition levels, you look at risks and compliance, you look at sustainability. Like, in current COVID times, it became so important to look at sustainability in terms of, are you equipped to continue with business? Your business continuity plans became super important. How your agility to respond to situations became very important. So that That is what, from an operational angle, you would think about. So, what types of strategies generally people work on? I mean, in my organization, to give an example, there are many teams which do different types of strategy and so on in other organizations. Corporate strategy would be obviously the one which is done at the highest level to define, to help the CEO chart out the plan for the organization overall, and then all the other strategies have to align to that corporate strategy, and that's what happens. And how closely you are able to align defines how effective your strategy is. Okay, so coming to the skills that matter, as I said, in terms of strategy is not something you can do. You can say, I'm getting into strategy, and from tomorrow I'm going to take on a strategy role. That's not the best way to deal with it. When you chart your career, you need to first burn your fingers. You need to pass through the fire and become gold, and then get into strategy, because you need to understand how the machine works, operational machine works, before you will able to sit back and say, oh, now let me decide, and if there are any design considerations. So because when you get into strategy, what you're actually doing, you're providing insights for key decision makings that steers the organization in a certain way. So it's a very critical role, and it's very important therefore a strategy person or employee to ensure that they have done their homework, and whatever they're providing, they are not masking it or overstating or understating anything. So it becomes very important. Obviously, analytical thinking, because you will get information from many sources. You are the conduit between what the organization should get out of it, from what all the noise that you have in finding the signal there. So you need to have that skill of analytical thinking, and something which you can build over time, by reading more, by discussing more, by learning, going through case studies. So you can definitely build this skill, even if inherently you may not be strong in that. The second point here, as I said, understanding the ecosystem to bring data-driven insights. So how is the scenario around you? Third point, also super important, and this gets lost many times in theory, is collaboration and stakeholder management. All the work I've done in my 5.5 years, and especially in this role, I can never be successful in my role unless I collaborate well and I manage the stakeholders. First of all, to understanding what they need, what they want to do, and therefore going back and giving that information, or decision making insights. So that is super important. Collaboration matters because you're collaborating with people all over the world who come from different mindsets, have different attitudes and different approaches to, say, problem solving, data, and also probably have biases, which happens a lot. So how you're able to steer yourself through all that and still get your voice heard it's a key skill that you need to build, and it's very important. So speaking up, courage, these may sound very basic, but they're very important. That if you trust your information, you trust your data, you trust your opinion, putting it out there for others to discuss, come to a consensus, all of that, it's very important you take that initiative.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
It was a very good and a wonderful presentation. And my question was as you talked about strategic planning, how long does it take before beginning with any project? How much time do you invest in strategic planning? And what are the major tools that really help during this strategic planning?
So the time taken for any strategic planning for any problem statement, let me put that, as a scope, depends on the scope, right? Like I gave an example of FMCG, which was trying to decide where should they start their global business center in the world, for that matter. Now, by definition itself, it's not something that can be done in months, right? First of all, there are still many hurdles that they need to pass through. This is just an idea. Then they have to collect data. Then they have to get a few, present that data to the key stakeholders who are the decision makers. And then this first step starts as to, okay, now let's go one level down and see what we need to do there. Like, for example, say this particular organization said, okay, we have now collected data and these are the 5 locations we feel are most attractive that we need to go and start. Now, the second level would be, are these the 5 locations correct, or should we look at other cities, right? Then the next level, okay, within the city, how should we go about it, and which processes or which team should sit out of there, and so on and so forth. So it depends on the scope that is defined. It can be from a couple of months to even years. Like this particular one would, probably it went on for 3 years. So even something like this should not go on for like 5 years. Then you've lost, the ecosystem has changed, and just in Hyderabad, a lot of things change in 5 years. So you need to be also cognizant of the time, but it depends on the scope. If it's how global is the scope or how local is the scope of this.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. That answers my question. Thank you so much.
Good evening, ma'am. First of all,
Evening.
ma'am, I would say that strategy has always been an exciting field. Like as you told that a few of the skills that were required as analytical skills, understanding the data driven, and collaborating with the management and the stakeholders. So, ma'am, if you could give some key insights on the challenges this field is having with some examples.
Yeah, so just in the first part for collating data, there are many consultancies which will give you the same data, right? If you're saying give me location indicators or give me footprint indicators or whatever, you would also whom to tie up with. Those are some key critical decisions as a strategy person you will have to take. Should I go to Accenture? Should I go to Cognizant? Or should I go to Everest? Or should I go to McKinsey? Right? So those are kind of decisions. First of all, once you get the data, how much should you trust the data? How much of it is what you can use for your problem statement? Those are some hurdles. Then when you come to implementing, then when you come to getting your strategy approved, you obviously have to have insights, you need to have debate, you need to have the right people who can approve that strategy. So it could be from 5 people to 50 people, right? So there's a lot of work just to get everybody aligned, collaborate. And then comes, as I said, the third part was collaboration. When you're implementing the strategy, you have to work with many teams. You will have to probably work with P&O to just tell them, this is the number of pool that, and these are locations we want to then get headcount. Or then you have to work with IT to set up the whole IT infrastructure. Or you might have to work with regulatory to understand if there are any licenses you need to procure, and so on and so forth. So the implementation of strategy means working with a lot of teams, understanding first of all which teams you have to work with also is important. And that's why if you would have done that at operations, you would already know that. So that those are many hurdles. And then obviously when you work in large teams, conflict resolution, biases, diversity, inclusion, all these become very real. So you have to then steer your way through and still be true to your outcome to be able to then get your strategy on the ground implemented.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for an enlightening session. I had a question as to how do you measure a strategy's effectiveness apart from the profits and clients' success? So how do you measure it?
Okay, that's a very good question, and that's a difficult question to answer as well, because it's outcome based, completely outcome based and long term. And like, for example, to give you a very simple example, if you say, what is your hiring strategy for the year, right? So for hiring, if you look at success, when you define a strategy, you have to define the success metrics also, right? your turnaround time to hire, or is this than this, it's better off than it's best in class, or the quality of talent you hire, or you're able to hire from the best best institutions, or you're able to hire across the country, in terms of span, or across the world for that matter, and so on and so forth. So your strategy upfront has to identify the success metrics, and if it hasn't, then it's not a complete strategy. So it's very important to identify what would be a success factor, and then you continue to obviously see if that is where you're getting to. If you don't get to that outcome, then there's something really wrong with your strategy, or your data was not correct. So that's very important to write upfront, put that in the strategy.
Yes, ma'am. That is true. Thank you.